Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show. I'd like to thank you for subscribing to our platform and thank you for joining us today. I am honored to have back with me someone I consider a dear friend and someone who I believe is the cream of the crop when it comes to being an investigative journalist. Everybody, every person in the bought-off lamestream fake media could learn a tremendous amount from my guest, Corey Lynn. She is she's, I guess you would call it, the founder. She's the inspiration behind Corey'sDigs.com. Corey's Digs was created by investigative journalist Corey Lynn for the purpose of digging for truth in a world where nothing is as it seems, then connecting the dots, which she is brilliant at doing like no other, and presenting her findings to you, to our country, and to the world. Corey focuses on larger webs and nests in areas that are seldom covered by the bought-off lamestream fake media. She exposes operations, oftentimes with detailed timelines, maps, and documentation, something the lamestream media will not do. And Corey, in the process, provides the full scope of what is transpiring behind the curtain. She is incredibly courageous, and she gets a tremendous amount of grief from those that want to propagandize you with a false narrative. Corey lays it on the line, and she puts the truth in front of you, the truth that you'll never experience through the lamestream media. Her website, again, with a C, Corey's, C-O-R-E-Y-S, Digs.com. Corey, welcome back to the Insider Insight Show on the Operation Freedom platform.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's great to be here again.
Well, it's an honor and pleasure to have you aboard. Corey, I want to start with the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And I want to focus on the medical industrial complex because you have done a brilliant deep dissection on many aspects of the medical industrial complex that the lamestream media will never go near. And in particular, I want to speak a touch on a number of the federal agencies that have been involved in the, quote, pandemic, end quote. And I want to take our listeners to a press conference that you have focused upon on April 18th, 2020, with President Trump speaking at the Coronavirus Task Force press briefing on that date. And why you felt, because I believe you're 110% correct on this, why you felt it was such an important event.
Yeah, it was the most important, as far as I'm concerned, the most important 4 minutes out of all the conferences. And like you said, I've focused on these groups and individuals and organizations for a long time. And in fact, I've been in the middle of trying to get this book out. I've only released 3 chapters thus far on the HIV/AIDS Global Slush Fund to the tune of $90 billion in taxpayer dollars. And the main focus of it is PEPFAR and the Global Fund, and it ties in the WHO and the Clintons and Bono and many UN factions, several other NGOs, Partners in Health, all of it. It's all in there. So I did a video on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I explained how them, along with the UN, control the entire healthcare industry. And what I mean by that is by controlling the funding and the grants and everything, they're controlling the research, the science, the policies, they're setting the priorities, they're in bed with the universities and big pharma and the media companies. So it's this huge conglomerate that doesn't just affect America, it affects the whole globe. So I did this long 2-hour video trying to break that down because I followed the money and I showed how this all moves. So when this pandemic hit, I had to switch gears, and so I haven't come back to the book yet. I still need to get to chapter 4, which coincidentally is Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, Bill Gates, heavily involved in all of this as well. And I'm just watching this all unfold before my eyes, and he's talking about PEPFAR, and of course we've got Fauci up there and Birx up there that have been deeply involved with the HIV/AIDS and Global Fund and PEPFAR for years. And so,
Corey, when you say PEPFAR for our audience, that's the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, correct?
Yes.
PEPFAR,
yes.
PEPFAR, President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. And that's been around, what, Corey, since what, 83?
No, that was created back George W. Bush I believe they launched it in 2003. There were talks about it for a couple of years prior to that, and then they launched it officially in 2003, coinciding with the Global Fund. They've given the Global Fund $18 billion to date. So it's huge. It's absolutely huge. So when this press conference hit on April 18th, and he started talking about PEPFAR, and the way he talked about it all, and I'm like, oh my God, everyone just missed all this. Like people caught the 3.7 million, through NIH, and the fact that they're now investigating the WHO, and they put a halt on their funding, but I think they missed a lot of this. So if I can just read some of this transcript.
Yeah, read. So first of all, the reason why you believe this was significant before you read it was why, Corey?
Because we're talking about the healthcare industry that literally sets the priorities and the policies and steers the funding, hence, our taxpayer dollars, into areas that are very, very nefarious. And there's been a lot of criminal activity and slush funds going on. And the fact that in 4 minutes he brought up 3 major ones, right. This is going to snowball. And
these are organizations that essentially have operated behind the curtain.
No, not behind the curtain. But not many people know about.
No, that's my point. Very few people. Corey, I ran these PEPFAR by 30 contacts I have in healthcare.
And they weren't familiar?
2.
Wow. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. So obviously everyone knows the WHO, and most people are familiar with NIH. PEPFAR has been because, well, I wonder how many of those same people were familiar with the Global Fund, because I think that one's been a little kind of under the radar as well. So I started researching all that 2.5 years ago and put together a whole 15-page timeline on how this was all constructed and who's all involved. And we're talking 3 former presidents, Bush, Obama, Clinton, and Bush Jr., obviously. And we're talking over 35 governments, and scores of NGOs are involved in this. So it's quite large. It's been going on for a long time. Now PEPFAR itself was formed in 2003, but there have been obviously a lot of taxpayer dollars going out towards HIV/AIDS prior to that. And I
guess that was the 1983 thing I had. I think the 1983 figure I had is $90 billion has been awarded since 1983.
No, it's a lot more than that. I mean, this is like $1 trillion
maybe that was industry. The $90 billion just to the Gates Foundation, maybe?
No. The $90 billion is just through PEPFAR.
Okay.
And then the $18 billion of that went directly to the Global Fund. But make no mistake, there's hundreds of billions that have gone towards the HIV/AIDS. If you go into like USAID Data Explorer and you start looking through the funding, you can. Well, actually, I think they only go back to about 2000. So. But at any rate,
so why don't you read the transcript, and then we'll do a recap of what you. And this was the President Trump speaking at this coronavirus task force press briefing on April 18th, 2020.
Right. So Deborah Birx had just finished speaking, and he comes up and he's saying thank you to her, and then he says, the fact is that we've been learning a lot from Deborah and Tony and so many of the professionals, the director, PEPFAR. We're spending the United States for that help, to the best of my knowledge, mostly in Africa, $6 billion a year, and that's on AIDS. And we've done for AIDS in Africa. What we've done for AIDS in Africa is unbelievable. We spend $6 billion a year. That's been going on for a long time. Nobody knows that. You've never heard that. I've never heard that. $6 billion a year. Millions of people are living right now and living very comfortably because of the fact that we have found the answer to that horrible, horrible plague. That was a plague, but we spend $6 billion a year. And from what I hear, it's very well spent, done by professionals, including this great professional right here. That was the thing that you worked hardest on and something that was very close to her heart. So before I move to the next paragraph, because there's only about 3 paragraphs here, literally all this was said in 4 minutes. You notice he repeats 6 billion 4 times.
Yeah, he drilled it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he makes it a point to let everyone know how much he's learning from Deborah and Tony. Mm-hmm. And that this particular thing, PEPFAR, has been very close to Deborah's heart. She's worked very hard on this. So, and the fact that he says that he's never heard of it, that's not the case, obviously. So back in 2017, he reduced the funding to PEPFAR by $1.2 billion for fiscal year 2018. And there was a big uproar. I mean, I was tracking all of this when nobody knew what was going on with PEPFAR, and I'm just giggling going, okay, he's on to them. They're starting to reduce funding. Now, that said, they're still doling out, like he said, $6 billion a year. That's a lot. So also, I pulled up some of Trump's old tweets back from, 2013, long before he was president, and he was harping on Obama. And the reason I did this is because I want people to understand he knows what's going on in Africa. So he says, every penny of the $7 billion going to Africa, as per Obama, will be stolen. Corruption is rampant. And that was remember when Obama was funding them for electrical power to Africa, and it was a huge epic fail. Mm-hmm. And then he also went on to say, we should be concerned about the American worker and invest here, not grant amnesty to illegals or waste $7 billion in Africa. And then the third one was, I really like Nelson Mandela, but South Africa is a crime-ridden mess that is just waiting to explode. Not a good situation for people. So that was back in 2013. So when he sits there and keeps hammering, we're giving $6 billion to Africa, he knows the corruption and the slush funds that take place.
Now, Corey, Deborah Birx and Tony Fauci, their relationship to PEPFAR.
So Fauci was instrumental with PEPFAR, and interestingly, it was all kept, as you've noticed, he's kind of flown under the radar for years.
Yeah, he has.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. He's like a behind-the-scenes guy.
He's behind the curtain kind of guy.
Who's doing way too much. So he, there's actually a video out there at some conference where he's bragging about how, Bush had sent him to Africa and asked him to look at the situation there and see if he thinks that it would be feasible and plausible to set up PEPFAR and we'd be able to get the drugs out there and everything. So, of course, he came back and he helped draft up the papers for PEPFAR. Now, I will say I haven't done the PEPFAR chapter yet because I started with the historical timeline of all this, and then the Global Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And then I was going to move through Gavi and PEPFAR and Clinton's. So there is not a lot of documentation that I had come across where his name was even mentioned. So it's all been very he's been kept very under the radar, mm-hmm. like some other characters that I tend to follow. And then Birx, she's on the board of the Global Fund, and she's been involved. She was the, it's not director of PEPFAR, but it's like the director of, in charge of the HIV/AIDS within PEPFAR. So I guess kind of director of PEPFAR, but I just can't think of the exact title. So I don't know if, since she's been on this task force, if she's still in charge of that or not. I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
So then he goes on to say, so it's something that I think people should start hearing. The World Health Organization, we're just finding more and more problems, and we spend this money really well. There are other ways we can spend the $500 million. That's $500 million. This is $6 billion. but we can find other ways to spend it where people are going to be helped in a much greater way. We're doing some research on certain people that take a lot of credit for what they do, and NIH is giving away a lot of money, We give away for years, for many years, they give away a lot of money. And some people complain and some people don't. Some people are extremely happy. So we're looking into that also. They're giving away approximately, as I understand it recently, more than $32 billion a year. $32 billion. And so we've been looking at that for a while, and we're going to be having some statements to be made about that. $32 billion a year. It's a lot of money, and we want to make sure it's being spent wisely. So he literally just mixed in PEPFAR with the WHO and NIH all in one little segment, saying how he's fully aware we are misspending all of these funds. Not only that, some people are extremely happy about this. So we're looking into that also. So, in other words, there's slush funds going on. People are reaping, money from here, and we're looking into that. And they've been looking into this for a while. So that's three big healthcare organizations that are monsters in controlling policies and narratives and instructions to medical professionals all over the world.
Now, that $32 billion that he spoke about, Corey, that was a combination of the World Health Organization, the NIH, and PEPFAR?
No, the way I understood that, the way I understood it when he was saying it is that was specific to NIH.
Okay.
But I'd have to reread that again. It could be in combination, but
it's just NIH.
It might just be NIH.
And then when he spoke about we're doing research on certain people that take a lot of credit for what they do.
Right.
Who was he talking about there, do you believe?
Well, I would sure like to believe that if they're looking into the WHO and they're looking into PEPFAR, they're going to have to look into the Global Fund and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has funded $3.5 billion to the WHO. They're the second largest, just behind us. Mm-hmm. And not only that, something that's not really talked about much, they fund 7 UN factions. I mean, I've done the math on all of this. I don't have my spreadsheet in front of me right now, but I've gone back 2 decades to see how much they've funded here. And it's literally a shuffle. It's like looking at money laundering in real time. I mean, you're seeing it come out. He has a trust, okay? It's the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust. So all the investments and shares and everything go in there, and it's a nonprofit. Then he pulls that money and puts it into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he then funds all of his buddies with their NGOs. Mm-hmm. And then in turn, they will turn around and fund the Global Fund, which is also Bill Gates. And then the Global Fund has funded, Partners in Health, which is now working on this contact tracing bit. And, of course, the Clintons. I mean, the Clintons the Gates have given the Clintons over $300 million throughout the years, just through their Clinton Health Access Initiative. So it is a swamp. It is a big swamp.
And when I heard him say this that day, the person I thought was, he's talking Gates.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
I do too.
I mean, let's be real. There's no way that, I know I'm going to piss people off, but
go right ahead.
There's
I do it every day, so
look,
go right ahead.
He could push Gates out, right? We could stop all funding to Gates. We could do a lot of things to make things difficult for anything approved or operating over here. We could cut ties to the WHO. There's a lot of things we could do. As far as everyone wanting to see him go down in flames for crimes against humanity over vaccines, I don't see that happening, because right now you've already got millions of parents out there that feel guilt and shame, which they shouldn't, but they do, understandably, because they're coming to realize some of the bad stuff that's put in vaccines and some of the motives behind the people that are doing this, that are investing in this. And, they're not humanitarians, they're investors. They're making tons of money on this. And they don't seem to care about the 4.1 billion in injury and death claims. So I think that would be catastrophic to make these claims on that level that would then, it's not like you can take it back. Your kid's 10 years old now. They've already had, 20, 30 doses, and maybe they have some issues. I mean, I'm just trying to envision how that would roll out. But there are a lot of ways they could certainly come at him and push him out. And then I look at, like the Global Fund is set up, of course, over in Switzerland, and it has all kinds of immunities and protections. Mm-hmm. And so these are things I ponder. How would they actually take Gates down? They could certainly cut him off, push him out, cut all funding. But I don't know. I don't know how they would completely remove him. What do you think?
President Trump continued, didn't he?
What's that?
President Trump, did he have any other statement at that point?
He then, there was one more section. So he said, and we've been doing that, by the way, and we'll have some statements on that, and those are much bigger numbers than what we are talking about with national. If you look with our friends from wherever they come from, 500 million is a lot of money, but it's not a lot compared to the kind of money that we give out. I think over the years it's been averaging about 32 billion. 32 billion. So we've had our eye on that for a while. We also talk about the lab in China, where I guess 3.7 million was given some time ago, and we're looking at that very closely. Chief of Staff has that pretty much under control, but it's money that too bad it got spent there. But that was spent. And what year was that, Mark? It was 4 or 5 years ago. So Mark responds and says 6 years ago. And Trump says 6 years ago, approximately. So we're looking at that. And that's the lab that people are talking about. All right, so we're looking at a lot of things. This tremendous waste in our government, we found it in many different ways and in many different forms, and this is one of them. So you can see there, I mean, he downplays everything. That's what I love. He talks.
He puts it out there on the plate. He puts it out on the plate, right? Here you go. Oh, what's on the plate, right?
And no one asks any questions about this. None of the reporters just go, whoop, right past that. We're not going to touch that. But he says it very simple, very plainly, and people think, oh, he's just rambling and da-da-da. No. Mm-hmm. He just told you a wealth of information. Mm-hmm. And they've been looking into this for quite some time. So I think you're right, though. I think it is a combined $32 billion.
Yeah, I think that's what I thought when I heard it and then tried to digest what he was saying, because I went over this a number of times, obviously, as well. Corey, the 3.7 million that he says Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, is looking into it. He has it under control. This came. Well, that came, Corey. That came through the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease that Fauci ran at the time and still does, 3.7 million in 2014. And I also believe he reallocated 3.7 million in 2019.
Yeah, that I would have to look into.
Yeah, he re-upped it. Fauci re-upped the funding for gain of function of bat coronaviruses at that Wuhan Virology Institute.
He is such a little weasel. This guy's everywhere. He's involved in everything, and he's got
and Trump put his nose right in the pile in front of everybody. And Corey, very few people, you included, picked it up, but very few people picked that up.
Yeah, this is huge. I mean, this literally took place in 4 minutes. That was him talking for 4 minutes.
Corey, I am constantly barraged by people that say that, Janda, you're wrong where you say that Trump is in control when it comes to these medical experts of Birx and Fauci. They're, in fact, Janda, you're wrong. Janda, they are controlling Trump. They have him mesmerized. They are manipulating him. And my point is, no, they're not.
Yeah, he's investigating the very organizations they've worked with for decades. So What does that tell you? And not just worked with, but been in charge of at high levels. So if there are slush funds and misappropriated funds or drugs not getting to Africa, because there's a lot of that going on, then these people would surely know that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be, you don't make it to that top level if you're not involved with that part of it. A lot of people underneath it that are working for them are doing some good or feel they're doing some good, and they just don't know because they keep this all so compartmentalized.
Yeah, and the books are closed.
Yeah. Yeah.